Welcome to the Writer's Block. I am Todd, and this is Andy. We are back to the old grind of making regular videos and not doing interviews. Well, we're not doing interviews this time. Maybe next time or sometime in the future, But yeah, we're back at our selected topics in writing, and today we have quite a doozy. We have. Would you like to tell the audience what our topic is for today?
Uh, World building and character building, part two.
Yes. So if you are enticed by such a topic, then you're not going to want to miss what comes next. All right, so I guess let's I guess
That
let's
was
drop
very
there.
dramatic. That was good. That was very good, dramatized
Yeah,
opener.
in my mind, sometimes I'm an announcer, at something. I guess I don't know, however it goes. You know what I mean. You know what I'm talking about. Hopefully, if not, I can't explain it. I think I might have a mental disability. But anyways, let's get
That's it.
into the topic. So yeah, world building. So I I enjoy world building, to be honest. Probably more so than character building. I've always enjoyed world building. I've talked about the worlds that I build were built in my Minecraft servers back in the day, and how those influenced my plans and ideas for my fantasy series. This world building is just creation. It's putting your imagination on full blast and building something. Either building a taking existing structures and then making it your own, like New York City, if you wanted to create a dystopian New York City in the 2100s, and all the history you have to build to get to that point in time, and all the events, interactions, and politics and culture that leads to that point, and the new cultures that you have to build, or the new whatever's. I find it to be one of the most entertaining parts of the whole process. What about you? Your what are your thoughts on world building?
Well, I enjoy it. It's just it's tougher for me to, I guess, stop and outline and do it, or build it before I start the story. Like I have a manila or a pad here of character outlines, and I have a little blip on my town, but I don't, I guess I have never really, when you said culture and politics and all that other stuff, I've
Oh yeah,
never thought of it like that. I just, for me, I have a little blip, uh, and then if I don't like it, I later on I just scribble out what I have. Like I don't, and even in my story right now, which I still have yet to work on. Another week goes by and I haven't touched it. That's wonderful.
same goes for
Uh,
many of us.
uh well, I had plans on doing it on Sunday, and then I got the
Oh,
booster shot, and it just, that was a whole laying in bed situation. But
yeah,
I digress. Anyway,
didn't quite boost your motivation to write. I
it,
see.
good one. That was good.
I
Anyway,
don't think you really mean that, but okay.
so um I kind of touching back to that webinar series that I explained. One of the authors talked about just kind of writing and seeing how everything flows. Like she talked about, I think, the more of the character side of it, but I kind of do that with the world building where I'm just kind of writing and seeing what, you know, if this actually works the way I have it set up, or I need to tweak it or just add more as I'm going to it, because I don't really outline what the town is other than the population and it's a little bit of history, but that's like one or two sentences. I did draw a very poorly drawn map on this, and it's like I don't know if I really need to sit down and have someone look at it and be like, this doesn't make sense at all,
No,
even though it's fiction,
it doesn't have
or
to. Wish
like
I had prepared. I have maps that I've written as
this
well.
is, if you're watching this on YouTube, you'll see it's just kind of like it's a bunch of scribbles, and then I don't even really have Oh, and then I have stuff written down next to like big sites, and then I think the X's are. I don't even know what the X's are. Maybe houses. Oh,
Uh,
here is just X stores, shops, and businesses. I don't even have houses on here.
I'm gonna grab some maps, but keep talking.
Okay, and then so it like I have I don't know logging museum, hardware store, like the entrance into town, the lake that it's based around. Um, and then I have a compass, which is very important. So that's pretty much how I do it. I know it's different for you anyway, as you come back to life here in your chair, but it'd be interesting to see if any of our listeners would comment and see if you know how they do it, or if how well first of all how my map looks to normal people, because I've compared it to one other author that I've read before, and they had like a map, and it was kind of the same, a little bit more detailed, but I mean, obviously, mine is just a very sketchy or very loose sketch of everything. As I, but it also goes, you have to do more research too, because I have two schools, which I guess for the population would make sense, but it's fiction, so I don't know how accurate that has to be in that sense.
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, the maps, well, the world itself. I mean, it serves the story generally. So, if certain information on a map isn't necessary to tell your story, then omitting it isn't, won't be a crime.
Yeah.
Also, I hope that my folders aren't too loud. I know my microphone is right here, but so the maps that I have. So so I've got two sets of maps I want to show. This will be really quick. The first one, so I got maps for that fantasy series that I've been working on for most of my adult life at this point, and then I have the maps for that Fairly Human book that I released in 2018, I think. So, anyways, this is like the overall map that I have for. This is probably gonna be very difficult to read because of my crappy camera, but
Oh, it's on the. Okay, I
yeah,
got you now. Okay,
yeah,
I
so
didn't realize it was taken on a rug.
yeah, it's very well. I will say I made this for myself. I didn't expect to ever actually show people this, but um, I have multiple other like handwritten maps where I have like this is like technically it's supposed to be a continent, and each one of these little blocks is a kingdom. You know, uh, it's a fantasy game or a fantasy series, so they're all kingdoms. But each of these kingdoms is ran in this. So there's also different time periods, obviously, like for these worlds. The world itself spans 5,000 years or so, and this map is in one particular time period where these war-baron clans ruled each of these kingdoms, and certain clans were united against other clans and such and such. But then, in different time periods, it was ruled by entirely different species. Like because I got, it's in fantasy. You've got elves, you've got orcs. I don't have orcs, but I have a couple different types of elves. Those, were part of it. Here's another map of, it. All the little dots are just cities or ruins from a previous era because whatever. But yeah, these aren't really detailed maps, I would say, but they're something in that direction. And then I'll go over here. I can't remember if I have it in here or not. But so for my Fairly Human story, it takes place in Florida. So here's my really crappy map of Florida, and it's got a sort of, it shows the movement of the ferals in the book. The zombies over time, and I kind of use that as an idea of how they were spreading in relation to the progression of the story, because there's these hordes of zombies. They're existing outside of the bubble of safety that the characters are in a particular time. And I also have maps of the United States and how the world that we know kind of breaks down after these events. I had more maps. There's a map somewhere of I want to say So there's a portion of the story takes place in Winter Haven, I think. I can't remember because it was a long time ago, and I don't know where it's at. But I had a map. That's the one that I actually wanted to show. It was a map of Winter Haven, and um, it was like 8 or so blocks that were just blocked off that they were trying to build a sort of safe haven in. Although I can't seem to find it, so I'll probably just call it a day on that one.
So how detailed do you, I guess, how focused do you make your maps? Like how much time and effort do you
It's very
spend on them?
well. Okay, so for the fantasy stuff, I spend a lot more time with them because it's it's a higher degree of world building because I have to be more aware of where things are at, not just location, but also climate, terrain. Is this a desert? Is this a forest? Is it just rolling plains? And so there's a lot more to consider when making those maps. But the maps are made for fairly human, very basic, rudimentary. I'm not spending a lot of time trying to make a super detailed map. I just, for the most part, the maps, I use the maps as a, I wish I could find the one I'm thinking of. I use them mostly to just have a sense of what the town is like, I guess, or what the, I can't find it. But anyways, yeah, for fantasy stories, super detailed, well, super detailed as much as I can. I'm not a cartographer, but everything else is more, if I need a map, I guess, why do I need a map? Why do I need a map of Winter Haven? It was, I think the idea there was trying to figure out, like, okay, where are munitions being stored? Because, they've only got so much space, where are people sleeping, where are like refugees, stuff like that. This is because the camp in that map, it was after, like, the Tampa Bay area had kind of fallen to the ferals. And so they had just had a huge massacre where they were held up at this enclosure in, I think it was like Fort Meade or Bartow, which is a really, small town in Central Florida, and then that fell to the ferals. And so here they're like trying to build something that can withstand the hordes. And I don't know, for whatever reason, I just needed something to see, but it just needed to be detailed enough. But I mean, also, like, most of these maps I'm just making for myself, so I have an idea of where things are.
Okay.
But like
So
the maps for the fantasy series, so like if that were to, those could end up in the book, so that you
in
can
the
actually
book,
see what's
okay.
going on. So those you'd want to pay more attention to, because when it comes to finding St. Pete on the map, you don't need my crappy map to find it. You can Google it. But if you want to find, let me just look at one city in this one. Like, if you want to find Glamorgan, you're gonna need a map because you can't just Google that, which honestly, it's a weird name. I made this map a long time ago, but yeah, there's a lot of, a fantasy map would be more, you know, beneficial in a book than, or a map in a fantasy book would be more beneficial than most other situations. But I don't know. I'm out of breath. What about you? What are your maps
I,
for?
I mean, my one, I only have one, but like I said, it's just to kind of show where everything is. I don't know if it's, I guess for now, it's just for me.
Yeah.
Because again, I haven't really expanded on anything yet.
Yeah.
I guess if I sat down and expanded on stuff that, and in situations that I guess, places that these people visit, then I can go into like the detail part. I don't know. It kind of reminds me actually of the part in LA Noir, the video game. I have still need to play more of to kind of like boost. I think if I start playing that again, it'll kind of boost my need to write a little bit more here because I said last week that I wanted to have like my manuscript done by March, and it's December 10th already.
Yeah.
Still, And then because and then I have side projects that I want to do for my website, which I put one out today, and that's what I've kind of been focusing on a little bit more, so I can keep my fans happy because I have so many of them.
I mean, they're out there.
They're-
We have a small fan club.
but it's very tight. It's a tight knit fan
Yeah,
club, I guess.
we are. We have Letterman jackets with our individual numbers on it.
We do. So it's transitioning towards like focusing on that more and like taking a step back to my website. But anyway, parts of like the murder part of that storyline, you're a murder detective or whatever. And then for like the grant, without getting it away, you're searching for the serial killer, and he keeps leaving clues around different places. And each place that you visit that you get right, I guess it happens throughout the entire storyline, but the name and then the established, like when it was built, like pops up in your right hand corner, even if before you go in and visit it. So that's kind of how I look at it, without giving out too much information or like backstory, because like for maybe a random hardware store, I have the hardware store owner, I've mapped him out. But if it's his, for say, if he owns it, like if it's family run since 1935, I'll put that in there. But if he just happens to be the hardware store owner, then it doesn't really matter, in my opinion anyway.
Yeah, I mean, most of the time it all just, if it serves a story, then it's worth that extra step. But so you said before you don't really take into account the culture or politics when you're
no, I mean building? A little bit, because this town is so small, there's no mayor.
Oh really?
There's a common council, but there's no mayor, so you kind of have that.
You could explore that more though. I mean,
I need to sit down and do that, because I mean the towns, where my properties are in New York, they don't have mayors. They're so small, they don't have mayors.
Yeah, I mean that's actually, I mean, it is I don't know if I don't know how common it is, but I mean, commission forms of government where there's no executive or strong mayor figure. I mean, but the thing is, that's a kind of at least for me, that's kind of from my perspective, I don't see that too often. I don't know if that's just because it doesn't happen as much in Florida, but that would be a neat thing to kind of explore in the story where,
well, I wrote one little blip on how the police chief was making his first press conference ever about something. I'm not going to give it away, but I just put a blip in how he had to wait until like the common council kind of told him where to swing it and what to say, and he didn't care, but it was annoying because he had to like quote unquote be politically correct with these people. So it's kind of, I'm trying to build a little tension between the two groups, even if it's not a hell of a lot. But it's something I have to also sit down and do research on and explore a little bit more.
Because I think the politics, I mean, I tend to, I think I just enjoy politics too much to not look at it when I'm making stories.
I mean, you're majoring in it, so it makes sense.
Yeah. So like for example, even in my fantasy books, when you try to think of like, oh, what politics like in a fantasy setting, it's like, well, it's probably even more, what's the right word, consequential in a way than in well, I don't want to say that, but it's still very important, between like warring families or clans, or there's one particular story that I'm working on a number of stories in that series, but one of the stories is a sort of political rivalry between this like lead warbearing clan, which all the clans are human, and then there's this sort of royal elven house. They're like kind of like the leading powers amongst their race, and there's a bit of a war that they fight, and then they kind of end up working together at some point. I mean, I probably shouldn't say too much of the stuff, since one of these decades I'm going to actually release a book about it. But that rivalry, that dynamic that goes back and forth, is something that exists between them throughout the entire series. And that's one of the political things that happens there. But also like the dystopian series I'm working on. I mean, dystopias are really political in nature because they're, pointing out a potential future that we're leading to, or an outcome that we're heading towards that maybe we should try not to get to, if we can avoid it. And so, like, in a way,
Yeah.
it might not be as direct as other things, but it's still very political, and especially in the culture part too. The culture of a town, what's like, for example, your town, it sounds like some of the culture might be political correctness or something like that, so like that's something you could explore. Maybe there's a sort of cultural rift between the town, between people that are like, hey, you should be considerate, and other people that are like, don't be such a baby, so you could explore that sort of dynamic.
There's like a little bit, there's a hint of racism in there between, without giving too much away, a council member or two, I can't remember how many I had, and then like the deputy, the second in command guy. I put that's like, I don't, because he's African American, and so it's kind of like old school in the sense where, so when I see because there's some small towns, especially where I'm from, there's a lot of
Confederate flags.
Especially the more north you go, and it's just like, well, I mean, I see a lot down here, but I mean, high schoolers back when I went to high school, they had them on the back of their yeehaw trucks, and I don't know if they fully grasped what the hell that flag actually meant, because they would wear like their boot, like the style at one point was cut off tees, jeans, and then boots, like work boots or whatever, and then they would dip. Like that was a style at some point when I went to high school. So I'm trying to like combine, like taking that experience and like having these people in office, quote unquote, still have these perspectives.
Well, I mean,
and so they don't like,
there's multiple ways you can do that. I mean, for one, I just want to add on, like, that's kind of like why you see that up north and in the south is like, it's more of a urban rural / small town divide, where like, it's, I think you can go to you could go to like rural Washington state, which was like not even a part of, I think it's just a distant territory when, the Civil War was going on, but like, surely you could find stuff there, like Confederate stuff there in the rural areas, or Idaho, something like that. Anyways, for your small town, what you could do, and this is like, when you go to like world building, it's like, okay, well, if there's a rift or a divide, why is it happening? Well, maybe a lot of people are starting to move there, but maybe some manufacturing company just relocated there, and there's jobs coming with it, so people are coming with it. And some of those people, maybe they have more progressive views on society, and that's clashing with the existing culture of this is how it is, this is how I want life to be, and this is how it should be, and get that woke stuff away. You know what I mean? You could have that clash of cultures, and that's why it's one of the things that I it's gonna sound weird, but like one of the things I love about the world building is when you build up these kind of different groups and different ideologies and ways of thinking, and then you throw them together and see what happens. It's like, well, that's your conflict, your story. You could have a whole other political story going on in the background of your novel, of growing tensions and protests and all that stuff, if you want to dive into it.
It's because it's most of how I look at it, how the town really survives is the summertime. Because that's how I've grown up, seeing that if it's a touristy town, it's jam-packed. You get the people visiting these small shops, buying the local stuff, but also having year-round residents too. So it's a mixture of both. You have the seasonal ones who live, across on the lake, blah, blah, blah. And you have the residential ones that live kind of more in the center of town, where they're kind of like, which where they're kind of like, get these, tourist people out of here.
We could end up,
So
like, if you wanted to really spice it up, you could have maybe a brand new ski resort opens up, like just a couple miles away out of town, and all of a sudden you have year-round traffic of tourists, and then that ends up being kind of a
it's both good and bad because you're bringing revenue into the city, but also you have more people all the time.
yeah, that's your conflict. That's your story.
Mm-hmm.
That's your secondary story. You could have like you have this serial killer running around the town, but then you have growing tensions in the city, and maybe you have this killer getting away because the police are focused on like these skirmishes that are happening, or this maybe this protest over here. And
It could be something like it won't. Maybe
I'm not
that
saying you
might
should do
not.
any of this. I'm just
Well,
saying
no,
these
that if I
opportunities
used it, it wouldn't appear in my first one, but it could definitely appear in like a second or third one because I have like a side crime, quote unquote crime going on, and like this one, wow, they're focusing on catching the serial killer who, goes around and dumps people into bodies of water. Well, one body of water, without
Sounds like
giving
a
too
big
much
body of
away.
water.
It's a decent sized lake,
Yeah, at least like 6 bathtubs of water.
maybe 8.
Yeah, that's American using units of measuring right there.
Yeah, gallons.
It goes
But
with gallon bathtub. But
so I guess transitioning into, I guess, because character building kind of goes hand in hand with this. How, and I think we've touched on this before, but do you make sure you've mastered the world before you build the characters, or is it kind of here or there? Because it seems like you seem hyper focused on your world, and then if that's the case, then would you go and build the characters that follow certain criteria, or do you kind of have an idea as you're building your world?
yeah. It depends on the story. So like when it comes to this is probably something unique to this fantasy genre, and even like sci-fi in a way, is that the world itself, like it, you have to know the world to know the story writing in the world, So for the fantasy series, I do hyper focus on world building because I want to know the world. It's easier to write a story that takes place in Florida because I know it already. There's a whole lot of work that's already been done for me, and so I don't hyper focus on the world too much. For the Fairly Human book, like all I added was I didn't really add anything. It was just, if anything, just plotting out this sort of forest road trip as this family has to like escape zombies. It's world building is super easy, super much pretty much done. Like it's not even a major focus. Just a couple things, but not really. But so I hyper focus on world building with fantasy genre stories. Everything else, it's more of a background process. So I don't know if that answers that or not, but yeah. So
I think I'm like, when I first started doing this last year, I've definitely focused more in on characters first, because I have a bunch. This is all blip. This is a blip. They're not too long, but it's I just kind of have, so I have an idea of who the main characters are going to be, and then I have more characters that I actually came up with in my short story. One of the short stories that I had, I think, did I put 1 or 2 out there? One, they had 2 of them, but the first one that I posted on my my website just magically, created these 2 park rangers, and they fit, and so I kept them in. So I wrote them down and I kept them in my for my novel, because actually they would work well with the other characters. And then I have townspeople who appear in the book, and it's just a list of like hardware store owner, grocery store owner, defense lawyer. I do have mayor in the town written down on here. I don't know if I'm actually going to keep that or not. School teacher.
Make it so that the mayor of the town is just like a dog or something, like a Saint Bernard. You ever heard those stories where the mayor of a town is just, they just elect a puppy or a dog.
Yeah, no, um, and then like a school teacher, and then I have the common council members. Oh, okay, there are two racist people in that. Yeah,
Wouldn't be an American town without that.
no, would not. So that's kind of like I just write little blips usually, and that's how I do it. And then I try to. Ooh, there goes the sun there. Sorry, sun's coming through the blinds, but I usually focus a little bit more on that, but not even that to the extent of you doing like the world building. I guess I don't know if I need to start focusing a little bit more so I have a more idea of direction.
You know, like my world building when it comes to non-fantasy stuff, it's just I look at what is different about this world than the existing world, or what needs to be different, and then I just create that, and then that's it. So for the Fairly Human book, the one thing that was different was that there was a presidential administration that was working on a bioweapon or something like that for defensive purposes, and it accidentally released. Whoops. And so like you have to kind of create that sort of backstory, and maybe why was this being done? What are the origins of it? Was it a terrorist attack way back when? And so they wanted to some background. And so you can that's the kind of world building I do for that. But beyond that, it's not like for your story, it's probably like you don't have to go that in depth. It's not as necessary because you're mostly just adhering to an existing world.
It's an existing world that it doesn't exist, but if people like for your say, like for you as an example, or other people who have never been to these small towns that I have like witnessed, like visited during the summer, but I've also gone in the wintertime. I've worked in one of them.
Yeah.
During the wintertime, and it's just you don't understand how dead and desolate it can get.
Yeah, but like
weekends.
But what I mean is like you're not creating that environment though. All you have to do is explain what you already know.
Yeah, that's true.
As opposed to like, building up a fictional continent, fictional cities.
Yeah, that's true.
Kings or queens, and then fictional races, the history of like you don't have to go that deep into it, That's what I like about. That's why I say like with Fairly Human and other books, it's easy to write those stories because I know Florida pretty well. Like I wrote about We're Haven a little bit. I've been there a number of times. I wrote about the Daytona Beach, been there a number of times. It's easier to just take the existing information that I have, put it on paper. The hotel that they stay at when they're in Daytona Beach, but they stay at it. I mean, the town's basically deserted when they stay there, so they kind of just use this hotel as a sort of base of operations. But the hotel that they're using is a hotel that I stayed at when I would go to Daytona Beach with my grandparents. We went to the same hotel every time until a hurricane kind of destroyed it. But I didn't really create much. I just took existing information and then adapted it to my story. So it's not like all I had to do was just describe the city. We stayed at we made base at a hotel that was on a beach that was separate from the mainland, and the bridge that led to it was blown up because the enemy forces did this or that. It just little things that it's not like too deep. You know what I mean?
All right.
So when it comes to your novel, it's you don't have to go too in depth with all the creation. You're just kind of like, I mean, unless you want to like go further in depth, you could build a deeper story for the background of the city, or
Yeah, I guess
like, if you're talking about if we're going just real quick, sorry to cut you off, but like
no, you're good.
with your when you're talking about this race issue, I mean, you could take existing racial histories or racist histories and apply it to your story. Like there's a story of a town in Florida called, I think it's like Ocoee, or it's like Ocoee. It's a massacre that happened years ago, probably like 100 years ago, where
Okeechobee.
No, it's Ocoee, like Ocoe.
Oh,
It's
okay.
a small town. I think they basically it was considered like, well, it was. I was just reading about it the other day. There was a election going on, and in an effort to stop the black residents from voting, the the white voters basically killed everyone that was attempting to vote, and for like the month afterwards, ran everyone else out of town. And for like 6 years afterwards, it was a predominantly white town because they ran out.
Jesus.
Pretty awful, yeah, pretty awful. And the reason I bring this up is you could apply that, like if you wanted to dig deeper or build your town deeper, you could take a situation like that and apply that to the background of your town and say, oh well, you have a couple racist council members. Well, they should be more considerate of the town's history, if because let's say in this town maybe they had a similar incident where in the election of so and so, white residents drove out the black population and then seized their property and all this stuff. Things that have historically happened. You can. It depends on like how deep you want to go with the history of your city. How much you want to world build, so to speak, and then you can draw on that further with your political correctness and stuff. Where like you got the one character that's like, blah 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 blah. I'm racist, yada yada yada, and then everyone else who's like, it's not, it's not about being politically correct. It's about acknowledging past injustices. You can have like a really interesting, story within the story there. But it just depends on, how deep you want to go with it all.
Deep go, yeah.
So, and that's a big thing too, is just taking other stories that have happened around the world and then kind of maybe adapting them to your, fictional world or fictional city and seeing how it helps or hurts the story, or maybe produces an entirely different story. And maybe your serial killer, after adopting this new sort of idea, maybe a serial killer becomes more of a, racially based killer or something, which
I
you
don't.
can explore that from a couple different angles.
Well, this serial killer is he definitely has one. It's definitely one type, and it's definitely for one reason and one reason only. So it's not gonna.
Fair enough.
It's not gonna.
Maybe future novels,
Yeah.
maybe the next novel that comes out, if there's a sequel, maybe
There's going to have to be a sequel. The way I'm going to have it end. That's funny because you say I have the idea of the first one, or I have the idea how it starts and then how it ends, and then the roadmap is just squiggly,
puddle of water.
Yeah.
Or maybe the third book could be a character who wants to enact revenge for the massacre that happened, or it could be a follower of the commission member who maybe they got removed from the council, but he thinks that the massacre was justified and that they need to continue doing it. Maybe they need a new generation of it. You could like, depending on how you craft your world, you could have some amazing stories. I'm about to write one now that I think about it. But get all excited just thinking about it. I will say, I gotta say, world building. I know we keep trying to go to character building, and I keep kind of going back.
Well, I mean, because it definitely seems like for the both of us, I mean, you're definitely more predominant in the world building part. I'm kind of like 50-50. So it's interesting how, because for me, like, I realize my I guess my strongest asset when it comes to a writer is short stories that I can think of at the top of my head. And I don't have to think about the outside, quote unquote, BS.
Yeah.
And I'm just honing in on what's going to go, how it's going to start, and how it's going to end. And kind of just like boom, 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 4 points. And that's how we're going to end it here. I definitely see the struggle is where I can't just sit down and write. I have to do more research than I've normally done.
Yeah.
So
not too much more though. I mean,
it definitely how,
as long as they have a detailed outline.
Yeah.
I know we've talked about outlines before, but do you do detailed outlines, or is it more of a go with the flow kind of thing? Or a little bit of both, maybe.
It's like character, like these two pages they ripped, but characters, more characters, More characters. Okay, and then I have like opening scene outline, and then chapter intro or character or chapter ideas, you know,
Yeah.
and then the either or, and then it cuts to the same thing, sort of thing.
Okay.
And then to see if I have a prologue, but that's kind of it. I need to sit down and actually go through this more. I forget that I have it sometimes because I put it in my my big file folder that I have because my cat was chewing on it a couple times. I caught him chewing on it, so I'm like, I don't want him to ruin it. So I hide it and then I forget about it because I don't see it.
Yeah, there is a program that my uncle recommended to me, and I don't remember if it was Scrivener or if it was something else, but you can basically but you can produce your outline online, through this program. It's not like you have to be online on the internet, but it's another way to organize that stuff if you wanted to get it away from the cat, so to speak.
Well, after what happened to my computer, I prefer to have stuff written down.
I will say I do enjoy having handwritten notes as well.
Yeah.
I tried out Scrivener for Fairly Human, and it worked, but it wasn't my preferred way of doing it. So that was the last time I used it.
Yeah,
though it is a nice way to organize stuff.
Thankfully, I had all of like the stories that I had written already on my website before.
Yeah,
my computer decided to blow up on me, and then I had to like factory reset it practically.
I would say next time you're in that situation, let me know ahead of time, because I think there would have been a way to get those files off before wiping it. I have some technical doodads that may have been able to help, but aside from that,
yeah. So now I have all my short stories on like the one document for Microsoft Word. So if something blows up again, it's on like the OneDrive or whatever.
Yeah, I was gonna say I have a couple things on my Google Drive. I have a couple things I think still in my Dropbox too. I just let them sit there just because one day maybe I'll need them. Even though like I don't update them, so I'll go and update one book, do grammatical corrections or something else. Like a lot of times it's more, I don't want to say cosmetic stuff, but like getting the margins correct, getting everything more properly formatted. Stuff that I should have done originally, but I didn't know what I was doing, so I didn't do it. But yeah, I will say when it comes to the dichotomy, I guess, of world building versus character building, I probably do focus too much on world building because sometimes I feel like my characters are just like two-dimensional,
Yeah.
Like I'll have maybe one really good fleshed out, like the main character will be fleshed out and will be pretty well developed, but then like everyone else, all the supporting characters are just kind of like two-dimensional background characters that are like, I am person, I breathe, and they're not really good enough. But
well, maybe you should take the technique is that one author, can't think of her when I talked about the webinar, where she just kind of creates the characters that she writes, and and then see if it works, like who works with who.
Yeah, I mean it's true. That's one way to do it. I've also heard one kind of like dumb way to do it, I guess, or quote unquote dumb, is just take a character, give them a flaw, give them a positive trait, or give them a positive ability, or like basically like something to make them interesting, something that makes them God, I can't even think of the words. Basically create somebody who's like cool but not perfect, but seems kind of human, and then roll with that. It's like there's a quote of that somewhere, how to create characters that aren't just two-dimensional. But
yeah,
which I thought I followed, but I mean, this is like my own critique of my own work. So like I hired a couple editors to go through my work, and they, from what I recall, they never said anything. I don't recall them saying anything about character building, I don't think, but I've been meaning to go over some of my old edits. But there's a lot of good, useful information there, not just for the work itself, but for feature writing. But yeah, definitely hire editors if you can. If you have, a lot of money hanging around that you don't spend,
Yeah.
especially if
Well,
you're living at home and you don't have bills, definitely do it.
yeah, definitely. Well, and I got to have something too for them to look at too.
Yeah,
That's important.
it helps. It does help. It makes the criticisms a bit, more substantial, I guess. It's more
Yeah.
substance to it. I don't know.
Hmm.
But yeah, character building is it's fun. It's not
It's
as fun as world building for me though.
yeah, yeah. It's and then for me, it's just kind of like you got to do it, so I just kind of do it
Yeah.
just to you to help push the story along. I mean, it was interesting to like see how I wanted to flesh out these people, so I have a general background, but it's just like something you have to do.
Yeah.
I guess I have more quote unquote fun and interest in actually like fleshing out the crime and how it takes place
Yeah.
and
Like
how
the
you're gonna
story
find
itself.
it. Yeah.
Yeah. I can understand that too. Like with my fantasy series, I created the world and I created historical figures, and historical families. I've got some families that I have their entire lineage traced like thousands of years, which took a lot of like I kind of it took time, I guess, but like it wasn't didn't feel like work. It's more like just building this, extensive history. But the there's a few, events throughout history that happen in that series, and those stories are really fun to make. Like that's like the wars that happen between rivaling clans or rivaling families, or how like all the clans they unify at one point, but then after an event that I won't specify because one day I'm going to write about this. At one point after that event, the clans kind of start to fracture, and there's a war, and some clans have to leave, and they, then or the during the one particular time, there's like two different group of elves, and they basically fight each other until an entire species just dies off, or subspecies. Because there's two subspecies of elves in my fantasy era or genre, fantasy story. I can't speak English today. Um, there's two subspecies of elves, and they're fighting an endless war. One of them wins, the other one just disappears. Which the disappearance part is actually explored quite a bit, and because there's a lot of there's gods, there's magic, there's all this stuff, and so writing all the stories as they involve all of those factors is it's a lot of fun. But also, like when it comes to the fantasy genre, like the reason why I haven't published it, I think yet, is because it's just so there's so much, and I want to wait until I can dedicate like all my time to it,
Yeah.
because that's not something I want to half-ass, because that's kind of that's my I don't know my star child, I guess. Of all my works, that's the one that you know I'm really focused on long term. I mean, this is a series that I plan to make several entries in. I think I've got stories for at least 6 or 7 books at this point, all throughout the history of the series, and maybe even more beyond that. With any luck, I'll be the next Georgia R. Martin.
There you go.
I don't expect it, but not going to stop me from trying.
Exactly. That's a good thought process to have. We definitely have to work on our own mental thought processes and how to boost them and say, oh, this is pretty good, and promote it more than once a day or once a year.
Yeah, one thing that would help me quite a bit is just not having to do schoolwork, and then also not finding other excuses not to do writing, because that's my issue is like I'll use school as an exam um, as a reason for why I can't do work as an excuse, even though like I could still do work here and there, which I've been doing short stories, which, if you want to check them out, toddbyron.com. Although there's some, you know, sad stories in there. So, there's that. But viewer discretion is advised.
I was gonna say, do we need to put that disclaimer that we talked about in yesterday?
I don't know. I mean, it's
really
probably,
not.
but yeah, it approaches some dark territory. I'll just say that. Nothing like, I don't know if I don't know if I want to get into that story, but yeah, this yeah. Anyways,
Check it out. Just check
um,
it out regardless.
yeah, if you want to read some sad stuff, but anyways, um, I had a point. I still do short stories, but I want to wait once I'm done with school, then I won't have any more excuses not to do work. And I think my main focus next year is this dystopian series. That's actually I think I've got three books planned for it. One's like a sort of uh, they all take place in the future, but in different spans. Like the first one I think takes place in like the 2040s or 2060s, and the second one is in the 2100s, and then the third one will be probably maybe a century after that. But each one kind of documents this sort of they're all dystopian, so get that out of the way. But they're all going to document the sort of historical change of not historical. I don't know how to describe it. Just basically, yeah, it's gonna be dystopian. I, I I can't think of words today.
That's okay. Because I kind of have an idea for this series to go at least four,
Yeah,
maybe five. But then then I read some that these guys go on for like ever,
yeah,
but they take breaks. Like it's book from the series, and then it's something has nothing to do with anything, like anything of the sort, and then they go back, and then they do that, and then they go back.
yeah. I don't know if with this dystopian series, I don't know if I'll take a break. I mean, they're not all going to be direct sequels. Like you won't have to read one book to read the next. But at the same time, it'd be nice to just run through them all. But I don't know. It's a tough one.
Well, like for me at the Irrational series, I just instead of just having like the first story and then something different, and then the second story and then something different, it just was like boom, 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 boom. I
Yeah,
have two more I have to do, and then that's cut
yeah.
or dry. That's it.
With short stories, it's a little different because there's a lot less time involved. But
Yeah.
I, I feel like for me, at most, I could probably get it, if I'm really motivated that year, I could probably get two books out a year. So without school. So but the real question is though is I forgot the question. Basically, I don't know. I mean, I don't know if I want to rush out three novels that are interrelated in that way, but also at the same time, you don't each novel kind of sets up the stage for the next one. The first dystopia book sets up everything that you know the antagonist of the second book only exists because of what happens in the first book, and then the same with the third one, and it's the first one has a lot to do with it's dystopian, but it's more climate based. It's more you know Manhattan's underwater kind of stuff. That kind of I mean, it's more than that. It's basically like looking at all the bad things that happen as a result of climate change that people don't really think about, and then throwing it into this book and using it to cause a sort of global chaos that breaks the sort of world order that we think of now or know of now, and then it is reshaped by the end of the century, end of our century, and that's the world that you see in the second book, and you see what who is in power. This kind of goes back to the building of politics and cultures. What's the world like in this post sort of climate collapse world? Who is in charge, or what kind of systems of governance are in charge? If you look at today, some people say the proper form of government to get through this is with communism or socialism or maybe a form of fascism or whatever. And so the question is, which one of those, or does one of those win out, or maybe do they all lose out? Maybe there's something else that we haven't even thought of yet that is the functioning government.
Yeah.
Also, what are the people like? What are the people's principles and the people's ways of living? Does that change? Do people find value in things they previously didn't find value in, and so all these questions are kind of things that I would look at for yeah. Once again, I'm out of breath. I don't even know what I'm
That's
talking
good. No,
about.
it's definitely we could definitely tell from today's conversation that you are very. It's something that I could learn actually from your explanations of like how detailed you like certain like your worlds,
Mhm.
and then I mean your characters are sort of they're not left off to the side, but they're not as
Yeah.
focused on.
Yeah. Well, that depends on, again, I want to say it depends on the book, because like I've got a couple
That's
other
also
books where
true.
characters are like they're the big thing, but in these dystopian books, in many ways, the world is the main character. And um, it's I think somebody told me that the Brave New World was kind of like that, which is a dystopian book by Aldous Huxley, something like that, I think. But in a way, like the character development is the world's development. You know,
Mhm.
where is that world going? And I will say I've done a lot more world development than character development for this dystopia series, because in a way it's like I'm using an existing world and existing structures, but I'm also taking it on a radical journey, you know, into the future. So like, you know, yeah. And so there's a bit more world building than in with like Fairly Human, where like, you know, there's just zombies. That's the only major factor. Maybe a highway's closed down, but here we're looking at towns that might not be habitable anymore, you know. Or for example, there's a, I think it was in Alaska. I had this little, I wrote a little short story that I actually published on my website, but it was basically world building. And it was the dropping of global temperatures caused this virus that was previously encapsulated in ice in Alaska. It caused the ice to melt and release the virus. And so this virus starts like spreading in Alaska and Canada, and that's a whole other thing. You know, what is it? What does that do? What does that lead to? Then you look at you know, you can just, yeah, there's so many things you can do with it. So excited talking about it.
So, I mean, we could make this a whole
I could
another
go on for
episode.
hours talking
We
about
could.
my plans. You know, I mean,
I mean, we could have another interview session and just let you go. Just, but
I don't know if
just
people want to hear me talk that much.
have a book talk and just be like, go. What?
That would be interesting, though. A future episode idea where we talk about a book that we want to work on, or that we're working on, or have previously worked on. Maybe that's something.
That's an
Maybe if
idea.
anyone wants to hear that, let us know in the comments below. That would be
That would be
pretty cool.
interesting.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. Because I've got a lot of plans for this series, and honestly, it all came from an idea that I got earlier this year. I might have talked about it on the podcast once before, but I watched a movie it was produced by Michael Moore, but it was made by somebody else. And it was on basically the state of green energy and what progress we've made since acknowledging that, you know, global temperatures are rising. And it was like absolutely abysmal, you know, what the progress we made. So I was like, oh, wow, I thought we were actually much better off than we were, but maybe we're not. So like dig more into it, you know. I read this article. I think I actually bought the guy who wrote its book, but I don't remember the book, and it's somewhere. Oh no, that's not it. It's somewhere in this mess of crap. But I think it's actually here, The Uninhabitable Earth. I read an article by David Wallace Wells who talked about basically kind of some of the things that we can expect to happen over the next 100 or 200 years. And so it's like, okay, well, that sounds horrible, you know. And so I'm like, let me take all these bad things and then just shrink it down
Mm-hmm.
into, you know, a series of events that happen in like the 2040s, you know, 2060s. And then that's one thing that happens, but this goes back to like politics and culture. I'm also throwing on top of that, I'm throwing the existing political shitstorm that exists in America right now. And I'm throwing that on top of it. You know, I was just writing the other day about there's going to be actual culture wars. Like, I mean, wars, you know, where people die, and because it's going, you know, hopefully in the real world it doesn't happen and or escalate that way, but in this other world it does. And so that leads into a series of events that like it's, God, maybe we should do
This is a whole other thing, a whole another idea that we need to unpack, I think, at a later date, because
probably,
I
yeah, I was
feel
gonna
like you
say,
could go for another hour and a half. Now, I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but want to keep the people waiting to hear more. So, well, and also, so it's not a Todd driven episode. I have more to like.
Yeah, all right. Maybe in the next episode we'll pick up from where we're at, and
It's a good idea.
Because we could talk more on character building too, because we kind of touched on it, but we don't think we got into it enough. And I could, where I have more I could talk about on character building too. So I realize I talk a lot sometimes. Like I
just need to bring more to the table.
Hey, don't worry, it's all good. Sorry for talking too much. I won't lie.
It's good. It helps project, not only move the podcast along swiftly, but also it takes away the dead air that I have sometimes. Like I drew a map. That's the extent of what I did today, or what I did with my story.
So maybe next time we'll focus more on characters, because you could talk more about your main detective. I got a couple other books that are very character driven and have nothing to do with world building at all, so I could touch on those too. So
make this a little mini series. That's good. That's a good idea.
Yeah, a little series within the series.
There you go.
So all right, well, I guess we should wrap it up now before I go on another tangent.
We want to keep these listeners on the edge of their seats for next week's episode.
Yeah. And next week I'll tell you what happens at the end of the book.
There you go.
Maybe.
Not really, because I'm not.
Yeah.
I could, but I'm not going to.
One final note before I go. I've done all this world building for this dystopia series. I haven't done any real story ideas. I've just been crafting this world. I still don't know who the main character is. I still don't know what the story is going to look like. I mean, it's not going to be a traditional good guy versus bad guy. It's going to be something else. But I'll figure that out another time, because I'm just building worlds, Who cares about the story? I made an actual culture war. It's so stupid.
Oh, man.
Yeah, I mean, like the politics, okay, yeah, let's just end it here.
Yeah, we gotta stop, because you're gonna go on another rant.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you for watching. Man. Thank you for listening. Check us out on Twitter. Check us out on wherever else we are. Check out our websites. They are linked on the page somewhere. At the very least, I know they're linked on the homepage. But ToddBarron.com, AndrewSCamara.com/Wix or something like that, right?
Oh, I found out today. If you Google Andy Camara, the first thing that pops up is my website now. So you don't have to scroll down Google, just right there. Because again, it's sad. It's very terrible of me, but I don't know actually how I think it's Andrew Camara.
It's fine. Who needs to know when you've got search engine optimization?
Just type in my name, Andy, and then Camara, Camarra. Boom. First thing.
It's a lot of letters. All right.
Well, a lot of vowels.
Yes. Can I buy a vowel, please? But anyways, so thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you next time where we continue this conversation. And hopefully I don't talk as much, because
hopefully I have
nobody wants to hear me talk
to the table
this much. What?
And hopefully I have more to bring to the table. I should have more to bring to the table.
You probably do have plenty to bring to the table. I just won't shut up. And so you don't have an opportunity to actually say what you got to say. So here's what you got to do. You got to just raise your voice. You got to be like, listen, Todd, shut up. Stop talking for once in your life. Which, it's kind of funny. I'm actually really quiet normally. So
same. It's
kind of, different.
But, it's a good outlet.
Yeah, it's great. It's great. All right. Well, that's all, folks. Come back and see us again next time. And remember to like and subscribe. That way you can see more of this content in the future.